What's good? It's Woog. Dmitry Bivol just upset Canelo Alvarez, and by doing so, he retains the WBA Light-Heavyweight Title after beating Canelo Alvarez via unanimous decision. 115 to 113 on each of the judges' scorecards. What the hell was that? Do you guys realize that this fight was one swing round? Okay, let's look at the fifth round because all the judges gave Canelo Alvarez each of the first 4 rounds. So after 4, they had Canelo up 4 rounds to 0. Now, I had it 3-1 Bivol after 4 rounds, but then I gave Canelo, I think it was the 5th round, where he had to work a lot, but he just threw so many punches, it was hard to deny him that particular round. All of the judges gave Bivol that 5th round. If 2 of the 3 judges gave Canelo that 5th round, where again, he looked like he was working tirelessly to throw enough punches and to basically close the gap on what was looking like Dmitry Bivol starting to pull away on the scorecards. If those were actually given to Canelo, we would be talking about a majority draw right now. So even though the right guy was credited with the win in this case, these scorecards, I think, need to be examined. I don't think that this should just go away because it resulted in the right guy winning. And on paper, this was Weisfeld and Cheatham. Even though Cheatham, I think, is the same one who had Jermell Charlo winning by a few rounds over Brian Castano. But yeah, this judging in this case, it was identical scorecards. They all had Canelo winning the first 4 rounds, and then they all gave Canelo the 10th round. Everything else went Bivol's way. But giving Canelo the first 4 rounds, my God. So yeah, this ended up in a 115 to 113 decision in favor of Dmitry Bivol. But let's talk about the fight itself and the expectations and the ramifications. I would call this an upset win. Obviously, you had Canelo, who is your favorite. I did a video basically asking the question, are we taking Canelo and his performance by performance quality for granted? To where going into this Bivol fight, some people were, casually and almost dismissively saying, oh yeah, that's Canelo all day. And I'm thinking, yes, he did just conquer 168, but 175 isn't 168. And so I actually thought, in my preview video that Canelo was going to get a close and maybe even controversial decision where we, with our eyes, think that we either saw an even fight or saw Bivol apparently, seemingly edge the fight, but then the scorecards just lean the other way. And then when we see things like Canelo winning the first few rounds, according to the judges, that was well in play here. But what I did not expect was for Dmitry Bivol to somewhat dominate this fight. I don't know how else to put it. I felt like Dmitry Bivol was going to run off to a lead on the scorecards through the jab, through his movement, through being such a bigger or naturally bigger guy. But I thought that Canelo's payoff for the moments where he is able to get into range and then let his punches go, I thought that that was going to go a longer way. None of this stuff really seemed to bother Bivol at all. His high guard was enough to catch a lot of the straight right hands and a lot of the jabs. It's hard to tell what kind of damage those shots to the body were doing on Bivol. But, Canelo was certainly launching them. I think that he thought that his power punches were going to have a greater impact. But also, it looked like Canelo was gassed halfway through this fight. And I think that the reason for that was because, as we knew, Dmitry Bivol was a very good range controller. And at the end of the day, I think that he had the better legs. And I want to credit online boxing analyst Richard Dwyer for calling that part out. Dmitry Bivol's legs were one of his greatest assets. I think Teddy Atlas also mentioned that along with his jab and his mind were Dmitry Bivol's biggest assets. But because Dmitry Bivol is such a bigger natural fighter, his gait in terms of step-by-step coverage of the ring, if Canelo's trying to jab his way in or feint his way in, all it takes is for Dmitry Bivol to take 1 step back to kind of equal 2 Canelo steps forward. So when Dmitry Bivol is keeping the probing jab hand out there, kind of poking with it and then punching hard with it, Canelo Alvarez has to navigate this and then step his way into range. Think about like young Tyson when he had to feint this way, and then get inside. Canelo had to do a little bit more of that, because if he wasn't doing that, then he was simply just standing on the outside getting picked apart, high guard or not. It looked like Dmitry Bivol's jabs and his hooks were getting around and through Canelo's high guard, and to the point where Canelo's just kind of standing there in a lot of points, especially in the second half of the fight, where yes, he is kind of rolling with the punches, and he's, kind of doing this slick, like I can evade the punches, which he was getting less and less slick over time as he was getting more fatigued and, let's keep it real, just more beaten up. But it led to these pockets of the fight where Dmitry Bivol is starting to feel more comfortable and emboldened to let 4 to 6 punches go rather than just like the 1-2 or 1-2-3. He would start letting greater combinations go, and Canelo is just moving with them without really firing anything of consequence back. Because there were points in the first half of the fight where Canelo was trying to punch with Bivol, or better yet, waiting for Bivol to let his first couple punches go and then trying to counter that. But it looked like it wasn't having the impact that Canelo was having. And then when Canelo would let a lot of punches go with minimal damage, and then Bivol would get more aggressive in the next 15, 20 seconds of the fight, fighting on his front foot, letting harder punches go. Canelo was eating a lot of those punches, especially by the time you started getting to the fourth and then the 6th round. Again, I think Canelo won the 5th, even though none of the judges gave him that, because of the sheer volume of punches. But it was like, damn, Canelo really had to throw a lot in that round to stay in it. This could be bad news for Canelo going forward. And yeah, it turned out being that. He didn't have the cardio to hang with the bigger Bivol, and Bivol's boxing skills pretty much looked on par with Canelo, only he was a lot bigger. Very good defensively, and one of the wild cards that I wasn't really sure about was, how was he going to handle the big stage? Like, we know he's a longtime undefeated WBA champion at light heavyweight, but how was he going to handle, walking into the ring first, even though you're the one defending your belt, and then, waiting several minutes for Canelo to come in, which, by the way, the final countdown from the mariachi, that was a great entrance, wasn't it? I mean, these Canelo fights are really starting to feel like huge events. The Billy Joe Saunders one did, the Caleb Plant one did. I mean, these are grand entrances, and I thought this was a very good one. But I was wondering how Dmitry Bivol was going to handle fighting such an immense A-side fighter, how he was going to handle the crowd roaring every time Canelo let a bunch of punches go, and if he himself, Bivol, was going to get spooked ultimately by Canelo's punches, even in the punches that he throws and misses. Was Canelo's power going to truly carry up to light heavyweight, where you're not fighting a over-the-hill Crusher Kovalev, but you're fighting a still confident, still undefeated, reigning champion in Dmitry Bivol, 31 years old, about the same age as Canelo. And no, Dmitry Bivol wasn't spooked by Canelo's power. I kind of had my doubts in certain pockets when I would see Canelo coming forward and letting like a left hook to the body go, or kind of look patient like he's about to walk Bivol down. I'm sitting back like, damn, is he really going to do this? Because Bivol's looking a lot bigger than Canelo. Like, I know he's bigger than Canelo, and I know the face-off was what it was, and they both weighed about 174 point something going into the fight, but in the ring, Bivol looked massive in there. And so, yeah, he was taking one step back, and then he would just kind of control the fight more or less with the angles, with the lateral movement. He wasn't backing straight up. He was basically doing everything that we've been seeing him do over the years. It was just a question of, well, Bivol didn't look that great against Craig Richards and Umar Salimov. Which Bivol are we going to get against Canelo? Well, again, Craig Richards and Salimov were 6'3", not 5'8". So I really do feel like we largely took Canelo's performances for granted and just assumed that because he conquered 168 that, 175 was just going to be another guy, in another weight class, and there wasn't going to be any structural fundamental difference in the dynamics of the fight. But no, like, Canelo in this fight looked like he shouldn't be fighting light heavyweights. That's what it looked like by like the 7th, 8th, 9th rounds. In fact, the fact that the fight went the distance is really a testament to, Canelo's fortitude, his chin, because he started to get belted. Even in a lot of those combinations that he was like rolling with, he was starting to eat a lot of leather. And, Dmitry Bivol started again to get a lot more confident and more emboldened as the fight went on. And I feel like he started having less concern, he was always defensively responsible throughout the whole fight. He never really dropped his defensive construct nor his strategy. But I think that he started to have a little bit less for Canelo's ability to change the fight in one punch, basically. Like, Canelo could still hurt him, could still drop him, could probably still stop him, but it was going to take an onslaught of punches rather than one fight-changing punch, unless you just catch the guy in the right way and break his orbital bone or something like he did against Billy Joe Saunders. But yeah, I think that a 9-3 scorecard in favor of Bivol would have been adequate, would have been the most reasonable scorecard. I think that you could also consider a 8-4 scorecard. I don't see a way that you could have scored this one 7-5. And again, I don't think that the ultimate result of this should let these judges off the hook. This should be investigated every bit as much as a controversial fight that doesn't result in the guy who looks like they should have won winning. This was pretty crazy. When I heard like 115, 113, I'm like my ears perked up, because I forgot I might have been pouring, like a glass or something. And like when I heard 115, 115, like my ears perked up and I'm like, what? And then I heard that all three judges had it that. I'm like, are they really going to rob this guy so blatantly? And, they didn't, thank God. But man, that scorecard was inexcusable. So, Canelo does have a rematch clause, and he looks like he's interested in activating it. Bivol sounds like he's interested in getting paid handsomely in the rematch. So Bivol sounds like, they're coming back with, like, let's renegotiate the terms of this rematch. And, Canelo said in the post-fight press conference, we'll see. But he said that he does want the immediate rematch, which, let me know what you think Canelo could do differently in a rematch against this same version of Dmitry Bivol. Like, it seemed like this wasn't a question of like, this part just kind of swung this way, this part swung this way. This looked like a case of Canelo being heavier than he should have been, and therefore not being as dangerous throughout the duration of the 12 rounds as he normally is. Like, Canelo is usually the one kind of picking up the pace in 7, 8, 9, 10. Whereas here, he looked like he had, like, not that he had quit, but in his mind, he was like, he knew that he was up against it by like the 6th and 7th round. Like, oh boy, this is going to require a lot of work for me to turn this around. And you started to see him kind of invite Dmitry Bivol when Bivol kind of had Canelo up against the ropes, where he was letting his hands go. Canelo's like trying to rock back and, move with the punches, but again, was eating a lot of it and then was waving him back in. And at that point, I knew that this was bad news for Canelo, because he was trying to bait Bivol in. But again, the level of poise and discipline that Bivol fought this fight, that was the intangible that I didn't know that box was going to be checked, that he was going to be that composed in there. And yeah, he wasn't biting, any of those invitations from Canelo Alvarez. He stuck to the script, continued to be jab heavy, and instead picked his spots with the power punches. And I was just thinking, like, the reason I thought Canelo was going to edge a controversial decision was because Bivol wasn't going to get credited with the jab heavy attack. But instead of Canelo versus Triple G2, where Triple G looked a lot more reliant on that jab, this one looked a little bit more like Canelo versus Triple G1, where it was Canelo who was kind of getting backed up and trying to buy time in different spots, and, was getting fatigued in the middle and late rounds, and was looking for his pockets of opportunity to start letting his splashing, scintillating looking and sounding punches go. But yeah, Bivol just wasn't visibly moved or shaken up by the Canelo strategy. He looked like he was more or less in control of the vast majority of the fight. And again, it's only when you bend your mind to the superpowers and the reputation that Canelo has developed, and the mystique in Canelo, that will make you give more rounds to Canelo than he really deserved in this one, or who would make you think that Canelo still had a real chance in this fight by the time it hit the 9th and 10th rounds. It's only out of that over-the-top admiration and respect for everything Canelo's done up to this point, that would have still given him that. If you're thinking with just your natural boxing mind, just seeing what you're seeing and without the context of who these guys are, yeah, this looked like a pretty routine and, dare I say, a little bit easy, relatively easy win for Dmitry Bivol. So I'm not seeing, at least initially, what Canelo could do drastically differently in this rematch to yield a different result. Maybe come in at a lighter weight, but I don't know. Just even the heavier Canelo looks significantly smaller than this Dmitry Bivol. So I don't know what you really do here. And it would be one thing if Dmitry Bivol was a fighter who was reliant on landing big punches, or who was, volume heavy without having the sweet science ability, or who just didn't let his hands go. But, I like many, thought like this is going to be a problem of a matchup for Canelo, because Bivol is not only a very good sweet science style technical boxer with a lot of skills, but he's got enough volume to look like he's in control. Not playing the back foot game where you look like you're, okay, I don't want to mix it up with this guy. Let me just keep on moving and kind of avoiding a lot of the heavier exchanges, and let me just kind of stay on this jab and keep this guy off of me. That didn't look like the body language of Dmitry Bivol. He looked like he was not afraid. He looked like he was controlling the fight with the left hand, and again, starting to let the other hand go in opportunities. And it looked like Canelo, who was getting frustrated and then who was getting overwhelmed like a lot of Bivol's opponents do, and who was just kind of just looking like he was out of sorts and kind of recognizing that he wasn't in control, and then trying to walk Bivol down again, only to meet more punches. This was definitely Canelo pushing a big boulder, a big rock uphill against Dmitry Bivol, and it just wasn't going to happen tonight. It almost did, according to the judges, but man, in terms of what we saw, I think we all saw a 9 rounds to 3, 8 rounds to 4 type of decision for Dmitry Bivol. So it'll be interesting to see what's next now that Dmitry Bivol, by his own admission, spoiled the party on a Canelo versus Triple G 3 fight, which, who knows, we might still get that next. But it's going to be interesting to see if, even though Bivol is not Canelo, if there's any way that the Beterbiev versus Joe Smith Jr. winner will fight Bivol for undisputed champion at light heavyweight. I don't think that it's nearly as likely going to happen as if Canelo had beaten Bivol, just because the cross-promotional efforts usually require like Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder, like name recognition or something. But I don't think that we're going to necessarily see a Bivol plus, top rank type of union to unify all 4 belts. But we'll see. Does Canelo go back to 168 right now and defend his titles? Because he's always looking for the next big challenge. And it did look like for a minute that, like, damn, it had us wondering, is the guy invincible? I knew that this was a tough call to make in terms of who I was going to pick in my preview. I was really having a difficult time saying Canelo edging a decision, because we knew that Bivol was a very good fighter. So what do you do if you're Canelo? Do you go back to 168? Do you fight a David Benavidez? Do you fight a Jermall Charlo? Which, again, I think that both of those, and I thought this before this fight with Bivol, I thought that both of those fights were more winnable, or more easily winnable for Canelo than Dmitry Bivol was. Even though, I've seen people, I think Bernard Hopkins said that Jermall Charlo would have been a greater test. And we don't know the answer to this. We haven't seen them fight yet. But it's going to be really interesting to see how Canelo plans out the rest of his 2022. But yeah, let me know what you thought about Dmitry Bivol's win over Canelo Alvarez. It was just weird to see, because when you're watching it, it's almost like some fights when you have an expectation of something going the other way, but then you see how it's playing out, it kind of has like a, well, duh type of effect. But yeah, this almost felt surreal because of how good Canelo was looking against Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, even though I thought that one before the, face-breaking punch was a competitive fight. And then the way that Canelo just dominated and walked down Callum Smith, and which, by the way, he was landing those punches to the arm against Bivol. And you could see that Bivol admitted after the fight, like, look at my arm. Yeah, my arm was hurt. When he was asked, did you get hurt at any point of the fight? He's like, yeah, my arm. And by the way, I thought that this post-fight interview did a lot for Bivol's stature. He displayed a sense of humor. I mean, I remember in a lot of his past fights, he would interview in the post-fight in his native language. So to see him try to interview in English and just making that, type of effort and really extending himself to that degree, I felt like that could go a long way in endearing himself to the greater boxing and casual fan, because this is a Canelo fight. Everybody's watching, right? To the greater public. So hats off to Dmitry Bivol. I don't want to take anything away from him, and I don't want to make this too much of a, hey, Canelo just bit off a little bit more than he could chew, even though that's what apparently happened. Bivol executed a A+ performance here, stayed poised, stuck to the script, and just showed us all of the skills that made him the long-reigning WBA light heavyweight champion. So hats off to Dmitry Bivol for controlling, defeating, and beating up Canelo. It wasn't like one of those career-altering bludgeonings, but yeah, Canelo tasted a lot of leather. And even in the rounds that, everybody, all three judges gave to Canelo, Bivol outlanded him in each of those first 4 rounds. Granted, most of those punches were jabs. Again, the judging is just mind-boggling. But yeah, let me know what you thought about Canelo versus Dmitry Bivol. I probably want to do a live on this post-fight as well as talking a little bit of the UFC action. I mean, that was pretty wild in itself. But yeah, Canelo's ambitious rampage through the divisions has met resistance, and his attempts were thwarted in this case. Yeah, Bivol just retained his WBA belt, and it's going to be on Canelo and his team to determine what's next. I don't know if they keep on poking at 175 or if they go back to 168. But wow, it's just crazy when something happens and it's this unexpected. Again, this was an upset, but I would stop short of calling this shocking. I didn't find this to be shocking. If there was anything that was shocking about it, I think that it was the apparent ease and dominance in which it happened. That's the only thing that was borderline shocking to me. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you were into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.